It started with a wedding photo buried in a box she swore didn't exist. 4 men, 4 ceremonies, 1 woman, and 1 man. Now her husband, who only discovered the truth when police found a human jawbone beneath their patio. The strangest part, all her previous husbands had died of accidents. And she had alibis for every one. Was she a grieving widow, or a calculating predator hiding behind "I love you"? And why, in the end, did he still love her? The first year of marriage was quiet, almost too quiet. Evan Harper had always craved silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of noise. The kind of chaos that once consumed his life, late-night arguments with ex-girlfriends, toxic friendships that devoured his self-esteem, and the constant thrum of inadequacy that trailed him since childhood. Elise was different. When she came into his life, she didn't just lower the volume, she muted the world. She was elegant without trying, measured in her affections, but never cold. Her touch was deliberate, her words few and precise. She was the first person who made Evan feel chosen, not merely tolerated. By their second date, he was already picturing her in a white dress. By the third, he knew he'd marry her. And he did. A courthouse wedding, no family, no fuss, Elise claimed. Her parents had passed, and Evan didn't press his own, were distant, uninterested. They eloped in winter. Snow fell lightly outside the registry office as Elise smiled up at him, cheeks flushed pink, lips pale and trembling. She looked both fragile and powerful in that moment, as if she could shatter or swallow the world. 12 months later, to the day, the envelope arrived. There was no return address, no stamp, just a plain cream envelope slipped under their front door, nestled innocently beneath the Sunday paper. Evan might have ignored a junk mail or a flyer, he thought, but Elise saw it first. Her hand froze halfway to the doorknob. Her eyes locked onto the envelope like it had teeth. He noticed her go pale. "Everything okay?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stepped over the envelope and went to the kitchen, muttering something about coffee. Evan picked it up. Inside was a single glossy photo, slightly curled at the edges, as if it had been handled often. In it, Elise wore a wedding dress, not the ivory pantsuit she wore at their courthouse ceremony, but a full-length traditional gown with a lace veil. She looked younger, but not by much. Maybe a few years. Her arm was looped around a man Evan didn't recognize, dark-haired, smiling, unaware. On the back of the photo was a typed label, "Husband number 2, dead." Evan blinked. The room seemed to constrict around him, the walls suddenly too close. He sat down on the edge of the couch, the envelope limp in his lap. His mind raced through every conversation he'd ever had with Elise about her past and came up with nothing. She was always evasive, charming, but vague. He'd asked her once, early on, if she'd been married before. She smiled faintly. "A few serious relationships," she said. "Nothing that matters now." He'd believed her. Evan stood, photo in hand, and walked into the kitchen. Elise was stirring her coffee, back turned. Her posture was impossibly still, as if she already knew. He held the photo out. "What is this?" She didn't flinch. "I found it under the door," he said. "Who is he?" Still no answer. "Elise." Finally, she turned. Her eyes, so often unreadable, were suddenly full. But not with panic, not fear. Something colder, like resignation. She took the photo from his hand, gently, studied it. Her fingers trembled slightly at the edges. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly. Evan felt something cave inward in his chest. "So it's true." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Yes. He waited. The silence stretched into something unbearable. The question he wanted to ask, the one pulsing beneath his skin, finally erupted. "What do you mean, husband number 2? How many?" But Elise didn't answer. She folded the photo back into the envelope, walked past him, and left the kitchen. The sound of her footsteps on the stairs felt too loud for the quiet house they shared. Evan stood motionless. The air was thick, suffocating. His mind whirred in fragments. Elise in a veil. Elise with another man. Elise saying nothing that matters now. The photo felt radioactive in his hands. By nightfall, Elise hadn't said another word. She made dinner, kissed him on the cheek, slipped into bed as if the day had been normal. Evan lay beside her, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The words on the back of the photo burning into his skull. Husband number 2. Dead. Who was husband number 1? Or number 3? Was she, was he the 5th? And if that were true, what happened to the others? By morning, Elise was gone. No note, no bags missing. Just a still warm cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, and an envelope placed neatly beside it. Inside was a new photo. Elise again. Different man, different year, same look in her eyes, typed on the back, husband. #3, also dead. The second photo shattered any illusion that Elise's past could be explained away. Evan sat at the kitchen table for hours. Both photographs laid out before him, side by side like matching tombstones. Same bride, same smile. Different, dead men. Her face in each image held that same unreadable stillness, as if she were standing at the edge of something only she could see. She hadn't come back by nightfall. Panic turned to obsession. Evan opened her laptop, cracked her password using their anniversary date, and dove into the depths of a woman he no longer recognized. It didn't take long. In a buried folder labeled archive_2013, he found a scan of an old marriage license. Elise wasn't even listed as Elise. She was Mara Bennett. The year was 2012. Husband Kevin Doyle, deceased, 2015. Official cause of death: car crash on a remote stretch of highway in Oregon. No surviving relatives. No foul play suspected. The hairs on Evan's arms stood on end. He searched again this time using Mara Bennett on public records databases. And there it was, a name change filed in 2016 to Renee Caldwell. Another marriage license surfaced. Husband, Malcolm Tate, died in 2017. Gas leak, ruled accidental. Then another name change. Juliette Moore. Another marriage. Another dead man. By the time she became Elise Harper, she'd already buried at least 3 husbands. Evan's chest tightened. He could barely breathe. He scribbled the names onto a notepad, his handwriting unraveling with each addition. For aliases, for husbands, for different causes of death. All accidents. All tidy. He knew what this looked like. But what chilled him wasn't the pattern, it was the precision. Each marriage lasted less than 3 years. Each death occurred in a different state. No close family members, no friends, no traces. She'd chosen men like him, lonely, untethered, easy to isolate. She was methodical, and Evan had been the next in line. At 2:13 a.m., Evan called the local police. He didn't even know what to report. He tried to explain. I think my wife might be connected to several ... deaths. She's had multiple identities. There's a pattern. The officer asked if he was in danger. Evan didn't know how to answer. The police took his statement, but said they needed more. Changing your name isn't a crime, they told him. And accidents? Well, they're still just accidents, unless you've got evidence. He hung up in disbelief. She'd planned for that too. For the next few days, Evan barely slept. He retraced every moment of their relationship, how they met at a used bookstore, how she always avoided cameras, how she refused social media, how she insisted on renting instead of buying, how they moved every 6 months. Every memory, once warm, now felt stage. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a man unraveling, pale, sunken-eyed, haunted. One night, he opened an old box of Elise's keepsakes, the one she never let him touch. Inside were letters, faded photographs, scraps of fabric, and one funeral pamphlet. It was for Thomas Vance, age 39, died in 2010, no family listed. No surviving spouse. But Evan recognized the woman in the photo beside him. Same smile, same eyes. Different name again. He realized something terrifying. Kevin, Malcolm, Thomas. That made 3, the man in the first photo. Husband hashtag to Thomas was husband hash. 1. Evan wasn't the 5th. He was the 5th confirmed dead man's successor. And if Elise had vanished before, was she running or was she preparing? He stared at the pamphlet in his hands. The next question came. Like a whisper from his own bones. Was she waiting for the right moment to kill me too? He needed answers, not theories, not fear. Facts. He scoured every death certificate he could find. Patterns emerged. All the men died while Elise was out of town, visiting an alleged cousin. Always the same name, Marla Duval. No trace of her anywhere. No real address. No phone number. Just a placeholder identity. But on one receipt tucked into an old folder under the name Juliette Moore, he found something Elise must have missed. A dry cleaning stub, addressed to a house in upstate New York, under a different name entirely, Claire Delacroix. Evan stared at the paper. If Elise was hiding, maybe she was hiding something there. He packed a bag. The drive to upstate New York was silent. Evan couldn't remember how long he'd been on the road. Hours blurred behind foggy windshields and toll booth receipts. The stub with the name Claire Delacroix was taped to his dashboard like a compass, guiding him toward something he wasn't ready to face, but couldn't turn away from with each mile. He thought about Elise, her laugh in the mornings, small and unexpected, like it surprised her. The way she'd touch his wrist when he was anxious, grounding him without a word. How she could disappear into a room full of people and still make him feel like the only person in the world. That was her gift, making you feel singular. And Evan had fallen so willingly. He remembered how early in their courtship she'd once said, "I only like quiet men. No noise, no drama." He smiled, thinking it was a compliment. Now, he wondered if it had been a screening process. The house listed under Claire Delacroix was a modest cottage, worn but maintained, tucked behind a grove of white pine trees. No car in the driveway. No movement inside. Evan parked across the street and waited until dusk. When the lights didn't come on, he crept across the yard and found the front door unlocked. Inside, the air was dry and cold. Everything was too neat. Stale potpourri smell hung in the corners, masking something older dust, maybe, or rot. In the back room, he found what she'd hidden. Dozens of photographs, pinned to corkboards and tucked into plastic sleeves. Men's faces, smiling, laughing. Some of them Evan recognized, others he didn't. Marriage licenses, death certificates, newspaper clippings, a wedding ring taped beneath each man's photo. Her trophies, and right in the center, a framed picture. Of him, his stomach turned. He stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. She had already decided what he would become. He was just a file waiting to be closed. Later, back at a roadside motel, Evan sat at the edge of the bed with a framed photo of himself on the nightstand. He couldn't stop staring at it. Why keep a shrine? Why document it all? Then he remembered something Elise once said while watching a Netflix crime doc. People always think killers enjoy the moment of death, but it's the planning they love. The illusion of intimacy before the end. That's where the real power is. At the time, he had laughed, brushing it off. She smiled when she said it. That same soft, closed-lip smile she wore in every photo. the one that never reached her eyes. Now he wondered if that smile had ever meant anything at all. He thought of the cabinet in their bedroom always locked. She said it held tax records. He never questioned it or her walks at night. Or fresh air, she claimed. Always the same coat. Always back within 40 minutes. Never a trace of sweat or mud or meaning. She was a creature of habits that formed a cage and he'd lived inside it willingly. He pulled out her old journal. The one. She kept tucked beneath her side of the bed. It was filled with clippings from crime novels, underlined passages, handwritten questions like what defines justice? And how does grief distort truth? In one margin, she had scribbled, a lie repeated enough becomes devotion. Evan closed the journal and wept. She didn't love him. She studied him. Every moment of tenderness had been surveillance. Every night they made love, she had been collecting data. Mapping his vulnerabilities. Calculating just how long it would take to convince him that her past didn't matter, so her future could become his death. And still, the memory of her touch made his skin ache. That was the worst part. Even now knowing what he knew he missed. Her, not the predator, not the planner, but the illusion of her. The comfort she simulated. The peace she made him believe was real. He once thought she was scarred by love. Now, he wonders if she left the scars. Outside, thunder cracked across the hills. Evan looked at his phone. No messages. No missed calls. But in his inbox sat a new email. No sender, no subject, just one line of text. Stop digging. Some graves are meant to stay closed. And attached a photo of their backyard. Patio, freshly dug earth. The email haunted him for days. Evan stared at the attached photo on his laptop, his backyard patio. The one Elise had insisted they install herself last summer. She'd been oddly enthusiastic about it, as if laying bricks was some long-held dream. At the time, he thought it was charming. Now, he wondered what lay beneath. He didn't reply to the email. There was no sender, no metadata, no trace of origin. Just that message. Stop digging. Some graves are meant to stay closed, but Evan couldn't stop. Not anymore. 2 days later, Elise announced she was going to visit her sister in Vermont. Last-minute trip, she said, to clear her head. She kissed Evan softly on the cheek as she left. Bags packed with surgical precision. Her eyes lingered on his face before she walked out the door, as if memorizing it. Or saying goodbye. He waited until her taillights disappeared down the street. Then he grabbed a flashlight and crowbar and headed to the crawlspace. The entrance was behind the laundry room, beneath a trapdoor they rarely used. Evan had only been down there once when the plumber came after a pipe burst in the winter. Elise always said it was too dusty for storage. Claustrophobic. It's not worth the effort. The truth was darker than dust. The crawlspace was tighter than he remembered. Low ceilings, cobwebs everywhere. The kind of place light gets swallowed. He moved on his elbows, flashlight gripped in his teeth, heart pounding in his ears. He wasn't looking for bones. He was looking for answers. Old journals, fake IDs, something to connect Elise to the other names, the other deaths. He scoured the far corners, opened a rusted toolbox that held nothing but broken picture frames and water-damaged documents. A few of the papers were burnt around the edges, almost destroyed, almost forgotten, and then he saw it. Something white poking through the dirt. He reached for it. At first, it looked like a shard of porcelain. But when his fingers brushed its edge, a jolt ran through him. The shape was too deliberate, too organic. He brushed away more dirt. Another fragment appeared, then another. The third one had a molar still intact. Evan's scream caught in his throat. He scrambled backward, heading his head on a wooden beam. Dirt filled his nose and mouth as he gasped, dragging himself toward the trapdoor like something was chasing him. He didn't call Elise. He called 911. The police arrived within the hour. 2 officers, then detectives, then forensics. The backyard was cordoned off by morning. Yellow tape wrapped around the patio like a crime scene gift box. Neighbors peeked from windows. One child asked if someone had died. Evan stood on the sidewalk in a daze, blanket over his shoulders, watching strangers exhume the truth. The lead detective, a tired-looking woman named Ruiz, approached him with a clipboard. "They're bones," she said flatly. "Human, likely adult, possibly more than one set." Evan nodded. He felt weightless. Disembodied Ruiz narrowed her eyes. "You sure your wife didn't mention anything about this property's history?" "It was a new build," he replied quietly. "She chose it." Ruiz sighed. "Of course she did." By midday, Elise was back. She didn't call ahead. She simply walked into the station, her coat still buttoned, a travel mug in hand. She looked composed. Her hair was tied neatly. No sign of stress. If anything, she looked ... refreshed. When she saw Evan, she smiled. Not warm, not cruel. Just enough. Detective Ruiz motioned for her to sit. Elise obeyed without hesitation. No lawyers. No protests. She stared at Evan for a long moment, then tilted her head. "You shouldn't have gone." "Looking, Evan," she said softly. "Not in the dark." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, are you admitting knowledge of the remains?" Elise turned to her calmly. "No, I'm just warning him. That crawl space has been dangerous since we moved in. Rotting wood. Rusted nails. I told him to avoid it." Ruiz didn't flinch. "We found bones. Human bones." "I'm aware. Then how do you explain that?" Elise smiled again. "I don't. That's your job." Evan's voice cracked. "You buried them, didn't you?" Elise looked at him with something close to pity. "Sweetheart, you can barely kill a spider. Do you really think you could love someone capable of murder?" That silenced the room. Because he didn't know the answer. They let her go that evening. Pending forensic confirmation, there wasn't enough to hold her. No murder weapon. No victim ID. Just bones beneath dirt and a woman too poised to be rattled. Evan stood by the squad car, numb, as Elise walked past him. She paused only once. "You open the door, Evan," she whispered. "Now you have to live with what's..." Inside, that night, Evan didn't sleep. He stared out the window, watching Elise unpack. She moved like nothing had changed, folding sweaters, checking her phone, humming a soft tune. But something had changed, because now the police were involved, and if Elise had planned all of this every move, every marriage, then maybe the bones were planted too, or worse. ... Maybe they weren't. Detective Ruiz lit her 4th cigarette of the morning. She didn't smoke often, but some cases brought it back the weight, the rot beneath polite surfaces. Elise Harper, or Mara Bennett, or Juliet Moore, whichever mask she wore, was no ordinary suspect. She wasn't just hiding a past, she was crafting a persona. The bones found beneath the Harper residence tested positive for human remains within 48 hours. Male, early 40s. Advanced decomposition, still unidentifiable. Elise had said nothing further. But Ruiz wasn't waiting for her to talk. Instead, she pulled every name, alias, and former address connected to Elise's tangled history. What emerged wasn't just a trail of marriages and deaths. It was a profession. Elise had once run a grief support group under the name Renee Caldwell. She operated a private counseling program in Portland from 2014 to 2016, a nonprofit. Lightly regulated, no clinical license required. Just charisma, good paperwork, and a few staged testimonials. Ruiz found a flyer black canned white, Minimal design with a tagline that made her skin crawl. Healing begins when someone listens. The group met twice a week in the basement of a rented church. Attendance logs were sparse, but a few names surfaced, and 3 of them matched death certificates Ruiz already had on her corkboard. Kevin Doyle, gas leak. Malcolm Tate, slip and fall. Thomas Vance, suicide by overdose, all ruled accidental. All had known Elise, all had been her patients. She didn't just seduce them, Ruiz told her partner, flipping through files. She rehabilitated them. Found broken men, grieving wives, brothers, children, pulled them close until they trusted no one but her. She became the only voice in their heads. Her partner raised an eyebrow. You think she made them kill themselves? Ruiz shook her head. No. I think she made them believe they were safe. Then made sure they died looking like they weren't murdered. Evan wasn't coping well. He hadn't returned to work. The house felt colder now, like Elise had exhaled some presence that never left. She cooked dinner, she folded laundry. She touched him occasionally, gently just enough to confuse him. But her eyes had changed. They watched him now. Not with love, with curiosity, as if she were waiting to see what he'd do next. One evening, Evan found himself searching Elise's bookshelves, looking for anything. Hidden notes. Burnt edges. Clues. Instead, he found a folder labeled curriculum. Inside were printed handouts from her grief counseling program. He read the first page. Lesson 1, to heal someone. First, make them forget who they were before the pain. His hands trembled. She had written this. Taught it, the next lesson read. A grieving man is clay. He needs a sculptor, not a savior. He dropped the folder and backed away like it was venomous. Because now he understood. She didn't marry him out of love. She found him. Like she found the others. Lonely. Vulnerable. Rebuilding. He was just another sculpture. Ruiz tracked down an old church janitor who remembered Elise from the Portland days. He described her as angelic, with a voice that could quiet a storm. Said men followed her like she walked on water. One night, he came in early too. Clean, and overheard her with a man named Malcolm, one of the eventual accidents. The janitor remembered the tone of her voice more than the words. She said, "No one will ever understand you like I do," he told Ruiz. Then she told him he didn't need anyone else. Over and over. Ruiz closed her notebook slowly. Elise hadn't just isolated these men, she'd rewritten them. Back in the Harper home, Evan stared at Elise across the dinner table. She smiled, soft, practiced, perfect, and suddenly, it hit him why she frightened him more than any murderer in the documentaries she loved. Because Elise didn't just erase her victims, she made them love her first. Evan couldn't remember the last time he slept through the night. Every dream blurred into Elise's face, smiling in a wedding dress, whispering in the dark, holding his hand at a funeral he didn't recognize. Some nights he saw her covered in blood. Other times she was just stirring tea, humming tunelessly like she used to. Awake, she was worse. He saw her everywhere. A flash of her cheekbone in a passing stranger, her scent in someone else's scarf. Her voice low, coaxing, echoing in the silence of an empty kitchen. His therapist called it associative trauma. He called it haunting. Elise still lived in their house. The police investigation stalled. The bones had yet to be conclusively identified, and Elise had retained a lawyer. Technically, she was innocent. Officially, she was still his wife. So Evan stayed in a motel on the edge of town. It's a dusty, mildew-stained place where no one knew his name, and the ice machine was always broken. He couldn't bring himself to file for separation. He couldn't stop wearing his ring. It felt like a chain. But also a memory. And somehow, also a lie. He walked into the precinct one morning, hollow-eyed, unshaven, and confessed, "I still love her." Or, I loved her. I don't know anymore. Detective Ruiz glanced up from her desk. She didn't laugh. She didn't look surprised. That doesn't make you guilty, she said quietly. Evan shook his head. No, but it makes me complicit, doesn't it? Ruiz didn't answer. He left before she could try. In therapy, he sat on the edge of the couch, hunched, palms sweating. The office was warm, the air too soft. A metronome ticked faintly on the bookshelf. I don't think I ever really knew her, he said, voice cracking. But I knew how she made me feel. Safe. Seen like I wasn't invisible anymore. The therapist nodded, but said nothing, just scribbled something onto her pad. He laughed bitterly. What does that say about me? If I loved someone who might have buried a body under our patio, still nothing. His throat tightened. What does that make me? Silence. Only the sound of pen on paper. He sat back, dizzy. The motel mirror was cracked in the upper right corner. Sometimes, Evan stared into it for minutes at a time, waiting for his own face to morph into hers. Hoping it wouldn't, fearing it might, he once read that abusers often left their victims, feeling complicit in their own destruction. Elise didn't even need violence. She simply mirrored him up, sorbed his doubts, soothed his bruises. Made herself the solution to pain she'd never even witnessed. She became his cure, and now, without her, he felt symptoms again he couldn't name. Grief, guilt, desire. He wanted to scream. But the motel walls were too thin. One night, he walked to the diner down the road. He sat in the corner booth they used. To share on Sundays, ordered her favorite tea without thinking. The waitress poured it. She not with you tonight? She asked. He looked up, startled. The woman smiled gently. You two used to sit right there. She always wore green, always had a book. I remember. Evan nodded slowly. She's out of town, he lied. He didn't finish the tea. Later, in the motel parking lot, he threw up beside the vending machine. His heart raced. His skin itched. He felt like his soul was unspooling inside him, thread by thread. The cold night air did nothing to anchor him. He pulled the ring from his finger, held it. It was heavier than it should have been. If I loved her, what does that make me? A fool? A pawn? A man so desperate for affection that he mistook manipulation for grace. He didn't know. He didn't know anything anymore. That night, he had the dream again. Elise standing at the foot of his bed, barefoot, in her wedding gown. Her hair wet, her eyes sunken but alive. I never lied to you, she said softly. You lied about everything. She smiled. No, I loved you. He woke up in a sweat. The motel room was dark, but someone had left a note on his nightstand, his name written in red pen. No envelope, inside, a single line. He survived because he ran. And underneath that, a name, Theo Martin. The name stayed with Evan like a whisper in his teeth. Theo Martin, the man Elise had never mentioned. The man everyone believed was dead. The man who, apparently, WASN single quotes T, Evan, took the note to Detective Ruiz the next morning. She stared at the name for a long time, like a ghost had just resurfaced. Martin was one of her aliases' husbands, she said. Back in 2018, married for just under a year. Listed as deceased by suicide, pills and alcohol. No body recovered, just a note. Case went cold. But he's alive, Evan asked. Ruiz exhaled slowly. If this is real, then everything changes. Theo Martin lived in a cabin buried deep in the Catskills, 3 counties away. The FBI had placed him in witness protection after he came forward in 2019. His testimony never made it to court due to insufficient corroboration, and then Elise vanished for almost 2 years. During that time, she transformed again, new name, new life. Evan's life. Theo agreed to meet, reluctantly. Only because of the note, Ruiz arranged it. Evan sat in a quiet government office when the door finally opened. Theo Martin entered, wearing a beard, a long coat, and eyes that hadn't rested in years. They didn't shake hands. Theo simply sat and said, "She's still at it then." Evan nodded. Theo leaned back like he'd expected this all along. "She almost killed me," he said. "And worse, she almost made me want her to." Theo's story began with grief. He'd lost his brother to cancer and joined an emotional healing group. Elise, calling herself Juliet Moore back then, was leading it. She seemed to orbit every man in the room. Smart, sensitive, magnetic. She said, "I had a soul made for rebuilding." Theo murmured, and I believed her. Within months, they were married. "She never raised her voice," he said. "She didn't need to. She just bent the world around her. You stopped trusting anyone else. You thought, why would I? She knows me better than I know myself." Theo recounted the slow erosion of his life, quitting his job at her suggestion, severing ties with his last living family member after Elise said they were toxic, and the nights he'd black out after tea she made. And then there was the insulin. "I'm not diabetic," Theo said. "Never was. But one night I passed out and woke up in a hospital with my glucose levels in freefall. The nurse said Elise told them I'd been managing type 1 for years." He confronted her. She cried. Then she hugged him and said, "I just wanted to take care of you the way no one ever has." And he believed her until he found the suicide note typed, clean, saved on a flash drive she accidentally left in the laundry room, addressed to his mother, who had died 3 years earlier. The timeline, the emotional tone, none of it matched him. It was written like a story, and the main character was already dead. That night, Theo fled, reported everything, but no one could connect Elise to the other deaths. No one could even prove Elise was real. She vanished before the agents reached her apartment. He had been in hiding ever since. Theo reached into a leather satchel and pulled out a folder. Inside, letters Elise wrote him. Dozens, all in the same delicate handwriting. Evan recognized looped GS, lowercase is, with tiny circles above them. Soft, tender, deceptively innocent. In one, she wrote, "Loving you is like sculpting grief. I mold it until it smiles back at me." Another said, "You'll feel better when you surrender to the loneliness. It's the purest kind of love, the kind where you can't hurt me anymore." Then came the audio files. Theo played a few on his phone, clandestine recordings he'd made late in their marriage. In one, Elise whispers softly in his ear, "You don't have to be afraid. If you go peacefully, you'll finally be free. No more disappointment, no more pain. I'll be here, holding your hand." Evan's hands trembled as he listened. "She loved making you feel like you were dying for her," Theo said. "She didn't kill us outright. She wanted us to surrender. She needed the death to look like devotion." Ruiz took the files. Her expression unreadable. "This is enough to reopen every case." She muttered. After the meeting, Evan sat alone in his car, staring out the windshield as rain began to fall. His thoughts spun. Elise's touch, Elise's voice. Elise saying, "I never lied to you," in his dream. But now? There was proof. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't the only one, and Elise was no longer untouchable. That night, the news broke. Theo's name was leaked. Elise was seen leaving the Harper home and walking into the nearest precinct. She turned herself in, no panic, no struggle, just a smile for the cameras. The press called it the widow trial. The footage replayed on every screen. Elise Harper, stepping out of a black car, hands folded neatly in front of her, not handcuffed. Her hair was tied back, lips painted a pale pink. She looked less like a criminal and more like a keynote speaker at a psychology conference. The world watched. She had turned herself in 2 days after Theo Martin's reappearance. Not because she was cornered, but Taz Ruiz said because she preferred the center of the room. She always wants the last word, the detective muttered. Now she wants a stage. And she got one. In a move that stunned the prosecution. Elise chose to represent herself. The courtroom gasped when she declined counsel. But her voice didn't waver. "I've spent my life misunderstood," she said, addressing the judge with terrifying poise. "No one can tell my story better than I can." Her defense was simple, manipulative, and deeply strategic. The men she married were broken. She tried to help them. They clung too hard. They spiraled. She was blamed for being the last one standing. She wept once. Precisely once. Describing Kevin Doyle's death. "He wrote me a letter saying I gave him the only peace he'd ever known," she said, hand to chest. "And then he left this world. I begged him to stay." The jury shifted uncomfortably. She gave them what they needed to believe. A woman. In pain, surrounded by unstable men. The prosecution played Theo Martin's recordings. The forged suicide notes. The letters. Elise did not flinch. "They were role play," she said flatly. "We were exploring trauma, intimacy. He asked for it. You expect us to believe that? I expect you to understand how messy grief is," she said. "How intimacy doesn't follow courtroom logic." She moved the jury like a conductor. Every cross-examination became an aria. Every moment, a performance. The prosecutors scrambled to keep up. Ruiz called it a trial by charm. Then came Evan. He hadn't known he'd be called. Not until his name was announced mid-morning on the 7th day. The courtroom turned to watch him stand. Elise didn't. He took the stand. Eyes flicking to her once and regretted it. She smiled. He swallowed hard. The prosecutor asked the basics, how long they were married. What behavior he noticed, what she'd hidden. Then came the question that lingered. "Mr. Harper, do you believe she intended to harm you?" Evan looked down at his hands. The ring still left a faint impression on his finger. He closed his eyes. "I think," he said, voice trembling, "she needed us to die, so she could keep living." A hush fell. He opened his eyes and looked straight at her. "She doesn't kill with violence. She kills with need. She makes you need her more than yourself, until there's nothing left of you. And then she watches. What's left? Collapse." "Objection," Elise said coolly. "Speculation." "Sustained," said the judge. But the jury heard it, and so did she. For the first time, Elise's smile faltered. The closing arguments painted two stories. One, a manipulative predator who identified broken men and engineered their deaths behind. A mask of compassion, two, a misunderstood woman who carried the weight of too many damaged souls, punished for being the only one who survived. The jury deliberated for 43 hours. When they returned, the room held its breath. They did not find her guilty of murder. The forensic gaps were too wide. The causes of death, though suspicious, remained legally accidental. The bones in the crawl space were too degraded to identify. Elise's fingerprints were on none of the forged documents, but they did find her guilty on 6 counts: fraud, obstruction, identity falsification, and tampering with evidence. 20 years, no parole for 12. She blinked as the sentence was read. Lips parted just slightly. Then she turned and looked directly at Evan. Not with hate, not with regret, with something. Worse, a quiet promise. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted his name. Cameras flashed. Detective Ruiz stood beside him, arms crossed. "You know this isn't over, right?" she said. Evan didn't answer. He was staring up at the courthouse steps. Elise was being led away, but her gaze was still anchored on him. Even in handcuffs, the gavel came down like a coffin lid. 20 years. Elise Harper, also known as Mara Bennett. Renee Caldwell, Juliette Moore. Claire Delacourwind, perhaps names not yet uncovered, was led out of the courtroom. Her wrists bound in steel, her expression unreadable. She never once looked confused by the outcome. She didn't fight it. She didn't cry. She simply absorbed the sentence like it had been part of the plan all along. Evan watched her disappear behind the double doors, swallowed by the system that had almost failed. To catch her at all, he wanted to feel relief. Instead, he felt unfinished. The deaths remained accidental. Despite Theo Martin's recordings, Evan's testimony, the forged letters and photos, and the chilling trail Elise left behind, no murder charges had stuck. The bodies had been cremated, buried, or in the case of the crawlspace bones too, degraded to be linked with certainty. There were no autopsy reports to revisit, no physical evidence that said she had done it, only patterns, only grief. And grief, by legal standards, isn't enough. Detective Ruiz refused to close the file. Back at the precinct, she kept a box marked Harper, pending. Inside were copies of every fake name Elise had ever used, the clippings, marriage licenses, obituaries, suicide notes. She pinned the timeline to a corkboard and redrew it every week. Chasing gaps no one else had time to follow. She played the system like she played her husband's, Ruiz told the press during a brief, unofficial interview. And I'm not done with her yet. She was still digging. She found a fifth husband, not Evan, not Theo, a man named Patrick Hanley. Married to an Elise alias for only 3 months before he accidentally drowned while hiking alone in Colorado. No family, no friends. Body. Cremated. Ruiz circled his name in red ink and added it to the board. This isn't over. She whispered to herself. Evan didn't go back to the house. He sold it to a property developer and left the furniture behind. He moved into a small apartment in the city, bare walls, stiff mattress, a kitchen too quiet. He changed his phone number, took a job at a library. Something simple, something he could leave at the door. But still, Elise remained in dreams. In headlines, in the inflection of certain voices on the street, in the feel of a hand on his shoulder when no one was there. He attended therapy twice a week. Sometimes he talked. Other times he just sat and listened to the clock tick. The therapist once asked if he felt safe. Evan smiled sadly. Safety is just the lie you believe before someone like her finds you. The letters began arriving a month into her sentence. Mailed from the prison infirmary, postmarked neatly. The handwriting was unmistakable, looped G's, circled I's. The envelopes had no return address. But the meaning was clear. She wasn't finished with him. The first letter was short. You're still wearing the ring. I can feel it. He burned. The second came a week later. You're the only one who didn't disappoint me, Evan. That makes you different. That makes you mine. He handed that one to Ruiz, who added it to the box by the third. He stopped opening them. He didn't need to read her words to hear her voice. Elise adjusted to prison with uncanny ease. She gained the trust of the guards. Quickly began volunteering in the infirmary, facilitating peer counseling for women in grief. Inmates described her as soothing, brilliant, and hypnotic. She started writing a book, a memoir, tentatively titled The Edge of Loving Too Much. The publisher confirmed interest. She couldn't profit legally, but she could still be heard. Ruiz slammed her fist against her desk when she read the draft excerpts. She's still performing, she growled. Even in a cage. One morning, Evan received a package, no return. Labeled inside, a photograph of Elise, behind glass, seated at a visitation table. Her hands folded, her smile soft. and one line scrawled in the corner in red ink. You still love me. He didn't plan the visit. The photo pushed him there, Elise behind glass. That same smile, that red ink scrawl, you still love me. It lingered in his mind like a question with no clean answer. And so, 1 week later, Evan walked through the iron gates of Rosefield Correctional Facility with nothing but his name and a dull weight behind his ribs. The guards led him through the metal detectors, past checkpoints and blank stares. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, sterile and unforgiving. The visitation room smelled faintly of bleach and processed. Coffee, he was told he had 30 minutes. Elise was already there. She wore gray, the standard uniform, but she made it look like choice. Her hair was tied neatly, her hands folded in front of her like a woman at a business lunch. When she saw Evan, her eyes lit up not with surprise, but satisfaction. Like she'd known he'd come. He sat. The plexiglass between them gleamed under the lights. She didn't pick up the phone right away. She just studied him for a moment, expression unreadable. Then she lifted it. Evan followed. Silence stretched thin. You look tired, she said softly. Not sleeping. I sleep fine, he lied. She tilted her head. That scar on your jaw. I never noticed it before. It's from childhood, isn't it? He didn't answer. Elise, he began. I didn't come here for games. She smiled, just slightly. No one ever does. Evan leaned forward. Why me? Out of all the men, why keep me alive? She blinked slowly. Because you listened. You didn't try to fix me. You just let me be. He laughed bitterly. You nearly buried a man under our house. And yet, she said calmly, you're here. Silence again. I need to hear it, he said. She looked him dead in the eye, because love dies eventually. But obsession, that feeds itself. Evan's throat tightened. You deny nothing. He asked. No, she said. Never have. And you don't regret it. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. I regret nothing but leaving a thread loose. There it was. The truth in plain sight. Elise pressed her fingers to the glass. You still love me, she whispered. It wasn't a question, but Evan paused. His heart thudded once, hard, like it recognized her voice before his mind did. Then, finally, he said it. That's the part I'll never forgive you for. She smiled, then began to cry. But the tears didn't touch her voice. They came in quiet convulsions, her lips trembling. In a strange collision of grief and delight, a cry laugh. The sound of a woman who'd won something he couldn't name. Time was up. He stood, not waiting for the guard. As he walked away, she placed a hand to the glass. She didn't call after him. She didn't need to. A week after the prison visit, Evan finally stepped back into the house. Not to live, just to retrieve a few things. A leather-bound journal, coat from the closet, and the last of his books. Most were untouched. The developers hadn't gutted it yet. But the silence inside felt different now. Like the house had been holding its breath. He walked room to room, pausing in the bedroom doorway. It looked almost staged, the bed still made. Her perfume jasmine and sandalwood lingered faintly in the curtains. He opened her nightstand out. Of instinct, nothing. Only a pen, a small mirror, a yellowing bookmark. Then he spotted it. Anna Karenina, Elise's favorite. She used to quote it aloud. There are as many kinds of love as there are hearts. He pulled the book from the shelf, flipping through it absently. And near the back, pressed between the last page and the cover flap, was an envelope. His name in her handwriting. He froze. The room dimmed. The air thickened. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper folded crisply. No date, no introduction. Just words in her steady, practiced script. If you're reading this, I've already lost control of the narrative. That's fine. I've always liked closed loops more than endings. You were never a target, Evan. That's the truth. I chose you because you made the noise. Stop. Not because you were broken, but because you were still whole enough to believe. In me, the others, yes. I watched them collapse. Some faster than others. But you, I never wanted to hollow you out. I wanted to step inside the parts of you that still worked and feel what that was like. I meant it when I said I loved you. And I also meant it when I told you not to go digging. Because love, when handled wrong, starts to rot. And I was never built for keeping things alive. You were the only one I never meant to kill. Heavens? Hands trembled. The final line was written smaller, as if her certainty had shrunk as she wrote it. He read it again. You were the only one I never meant to kill. He let the letter fall to the floor. That single sentence cut deeper than every confession, every whisper in the dark, every unanswered question. Not because it absolved her, but because it DI'd in single quotes. Later that night, Devon sat in his apartment, staring out at the city through rain-streaked windows. The letter sat folded in his lap. He hadn't shown it to Ruiz. He hadn't told anyone. Some truths didn't fit into evidence boxes. He replayed her voice. In his head, not the words, but the rhythm. Calm/certain, as if speaking from a place above morality. A tone that had never been afraid of consequence, and yet, that last line felt like vulnerability. Or was it strategy? Maybe both. He tried to imagine a version of her that wanted to stop, that wanted to stay. But in the end, even her love came with an if. If you don't, dig. If you don't ask, if you don't leave. Evan pressed his fingers to his temple. His pulse pounded behind his eyes. That, he whispered, is the most dangerous thing anyone's ever said to me. The next morning, he found another envelope. This one slipped under his apartment door. Inside, no letter. Just a photo. A rocking chair on a porch, empty, but still swinging. Time didn't slow Elise Harper down. It refined her by 2038, 12 years into her sentence. She had become a fixture within Rosefield Correctional. Inmates referred to her as Dr. Elise, though she held no doctorate. Staff described her as articulate, cultured, and intensely persuasive. She facilitated grief counseling twice a week, led book clubs, reorganized the prison library. No incident reports, no rule violations, no outbursts. She's the model inmate, the warden said in an interview. If everyone here carried themselves like Miss Harper, we'd barely need locks. But the locks remained. And behind them, she wrote. Her memoir titled The Beautiful. Weight of Broken Men had become the most requested manuscript never published. Legal technicalities barred her from profiting, but publishers hovered like vultures, eager to sell what the courts couldn't fully convict. Early drafts leaked. Online, fans emerged. Podcasts dissected her words. Some called her a monster. Others called her misunderstood. She never corrected either side. Detective Ruiz, retired in 2041. She kept the Harper files in her garage, boxed and labeled. But when interviewed for a 2043 streaming documentary, she sat across from the camera. Her voice flat. She's not done, Ruiz said. She just shifted strategies. Elise doesn't need a house or a husband anymore. She has an audience. The interviewer asked what scared her most. Ruiz didn't blink. That she has time. Evan Harper disappeared in 2030. No forwarding address. No confirmed sightings. His bank accounts remained untouched. His phone was found in a motel drawer outside Taos, screen cracked, battery drained. No sign of struggle. Just absence. Elise never spoke of him publicly. But on the anniversary of his disappearance, she wrote a short passage in her journal. It was leaked in the memoir's appendix. Some things are too precious to destroy, so we preserve them. In silence, in myth, in memory, or in shadow. The words became a tattoo among her followers. Elise sat before the parole board, posture, perfect, tone, sincere. She wore a pale gray suit provided by her attorney. The hair, now streaked with white, was pulled into a neat bun. She spoke of rehabilitation, of remorse, of misunderstandings that once defined her. One board member asked if she regretted anything. She smiled gently. "I regret letting pain speak louder than love." There was a pause. Then a voice cut in audio from a recent true crime exposé. Ruiz's voice, recorded 2 years earlier. "If she ever walks out of there, she won't be walking toward redemption. She'll be walking toward Act 2. The screen fades to black. A breeze stirs dot, and then a porch. A rural house, remote, silent. A single rocking chair creaks gently, moving though no one sits in it. Just air, just memory. And then her voice, soft, hypnotic, rises beneath it all. "Do you think? People like me are born, or made.